I always thought I would find my true love, and it would last forever. But over time, I realized that was just an illusion. Sure, there are rare cases where people stay together until old age, but those are the exceptions. My fiancée cheated on me with my friend in our apartment, and then she tried to get back with me. Timothy was on his way to the apartment he shared with Kelly. They had met in high school, and he had been completely captivated by her. When he asked her out, she said yes, and they started dating. Tim was deeply in love with Kelly. She was the first girl he ever dated and, in fact, the only one, as he was so smitten with her that he didn't want to be with anyone else. They dated for a long time before becoming intimate. Kelly was not only the first girl he kissed, but also the only one he had ever been with. They went to college together and continued dating throughout their university years. After graduation, they found jobs, bought an apartment, and moved in together. Kelly's parents provided the down payment, so the apartment was in her name. They began their careers and started planning their wedding. Tim bought her a beautiful diamond engagement ring and felt like life couldn't be better. One Friday, Tim managed to leave work early, so he bought some chocolates, flowers, and takeout from Kelly's favorite restaurant. He wanted to surprise her and show how much he loved her. He entered the apartment, put the flowers in a vase, and the food in the kitchen. Then, he heard some sounds coming from their bedroom. He walked down the hall and looked inside the room, where he saw Kelly and his friend Greg. They were facing away from the door, so they didn't notice him. Tim stood there, in shock, watching his fiancée cheat on him with his friend. What made it worse was that during the act, they both said hurtful things about Tim. That weakling won't be home for another hour or two, so we'll have plenty of time to have fun, Greg said. Tim remained frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening, with tears streaming down his face. After they finished and lay down on the bed, they finally noticed Tim standing at the door, still crying. Greg smirked, and Kelly just stood there, as if she didn't understand anything, without even a sense of shame. Tim was speechless. Eventually, Greg broke the silence. "Hey buddy, you might want to clean up after me. Since you're doing this, why don't you deal with the consequences too?" Tim, still crying, asked, "How could you betray me like this?" Kelly smiled and said, "It was easy. I just let him have his way. I thought you loved me." Greg chimed in, "She gave me more joy in an hour than you gave her in a week." With tears still falling, Tim asked where he should go. "I don't care, just get your stuff out of my apartment," Kelly said coldly. Tim went to the closet, grabbed his clothes, and left with an armful of belongings. He loaded his car with his computer and personal items. Despite there being many photos of him and Kelly, he left them behind, tearing a few up and tossing them as he left. He threw away the flowers and food. Noticing a young woman nearby, he handed her the chocolates with a smile before driving off. With no direction, Tim eventually stopped at a park to have a snack, but it lacked its usual flavor. He thought about calling a friend but hesitated, not wanting to face any questions. He ended up spending the night at a motel, using his computer to look for affordable housing options. He had a modest checking account, separate from the joint one with Kelly. He transferred his last paycheck from the shared account to his personal one. Although he could have drained the joint account completely, he refrained from any vengeful actions. He also updated his company's HR system to direct his next paycheck into his individual account. That night, sleep evaded him as thoughts of Kelly's betrayal consumed him. He had envisioned a future intertwined with hers, but now he faced the reality of life without her. Countless plans and shared experiences were shattered. Tim wondered if he could ever trust another woman again after this betrayal. Finally, exhaustion overcame him, though his sleep was restless, interrupted by tearful awakenings. He felt ashamed of his tears, seeing them as incongruent with his masculinity, but Kelly's betrayal had shaken his sense of self. The next morning, Tim woke up, took a shower, and began searching for a new place to live. After exploring several potential options, he found most of them unattractive or in unsafe neighborhoods. Eventually, he stumbled upon a set of 3 duplexes. Although modest in size, the unit was clean and furnished. Since he had left with only the essentials, he lacked furniture and preferred not to incur additional expenses. He had no intention of retrieving any of the things bought during his time with Kelly. One of the units was vacant and spotless. After writing a check, the landlord granted him immediate occupancy. With all his belongings confined to his car, Tim began moving them into his new place. While unpacking, he received a message from Kelly accusing him of draining their joint account. When he checked online, he found that she had indeed emptied it, probably upset because she had planned to do it first. But Tim had managed to withdraw some money beforehand. Tim was not great at cooking, and neither was Kelly. They often relied on eating out or ordering takeout. Tim realized this habit was straining his finances. So, he decided to visit a grocery store and buy some pre-cooked meals he could heat in the microwave, along with simple items like pasta and jars of sauce for easy cooking. Having lived in a dorm or with his parents before, Tim was not well prepared for independent living. He had to purchase basic items like sheets, towels, pots, cutlery, and plates from a discount store to keep costs low. He charged everything to his credit card, hoping to pay it off quickly. As Tim settled into his new place, he noticed a person living in the other half of his duplex, a cute young woman with strawberry blonde hair. She seemed embarrassed when he saw her and quickly averted her gaze. Despite finding her attractive, Tim was still recovering from his breakup with Kelly and wasn't inclined to pursue anyone new. By Saturday and Sunday, Tim had mostly settled in. Surprisingly, instead of thinking about Kelly, he sometimes found himself thinking about his charming neighbor. However, he didn't dwell on it much, feeling too emotionally drained to pursue any romantic relationship. She didn't seem interested anyway. While waiting for his internet connection to be installed, Tim relied on places with free Wi-Fi. He quickly deleted any mention of Kelly from his social media profiles and informed his family about the situation. Most offered sympathy, though his brother hinted that if Tim had treated Kelly better, she wouldn't have been unfaithful. Tim later discovered that his brother had also been involved with Kelly when she sent a message suggesting he'd be more understanding if he took her back. Tim held back from responding harshly and simply stated that he wasn't ready for that. He suspected that her idea of understanding involved tolerating her infidelity, which he wasn't willing to do. On Monday morning, Tim ran into his strawberry blonde neighbor as they both left for work. He greeted her with a smile and a hello, but she responded with a weak smile and quickly hurried to her car. Although Tim didn't expect a warm reception, her shy behavior took him by surprise. Even though he wasn't ready to start dating anyone, Tim hoped they could at least maintain a friendly relationship. Months earlier, Sarah had been happy. Jeff seemed like a nice person, extremely attractive, and genuinely interested in her. He also appeared to be wealthy. Although Sarah didn't prioritize material wealth, she desired a genuine connection with someone who valued her for who she was. Jeff's words and actions aligned with her hopes, and when he asked her out, she was thrilled. Jeff arrived at her residence in his shiny new BMW to pick her up. He rang the doorbell, greeted her with a kiss on the cheek, complimented her appearance, and gave her flowers, which she quickly placed in a vase before they left. He politely opened the car door for her, and they drove to a fancy restaurant where they used the valet parking service. After escorting her inside, he had made a reservation, so they were seated immediately. Jeff gallantly pulled out Sarah's chair and chose a nice bottle of wine for them. Even though Sarah rarely indulged, she found it hard to refuse a glass. Throughout the meal, he kept refilling her glass despite her polite attempts to decline. Not wanting to seem ungrateful, she drank it, but the wine had a significant effect, leaving Sarah quite dizzy by the end of the meal. Jeff had to help her stay steady as they left. Expressing her desire to go home, he drove her back to her residence. Along the way, he advised her to drink water to avoid a potential hangover and offered her a bottle, which she drank from. Soon, she began to feel overwhelmingly tired. When they arrived at her home, he accompanied her to the door and then mentioned that he needed to use the bathroom. By that point, she felt drowsy, so she settled on the couch with a glass of water while he went to the bathroom. Despite the early hour, she struggled to keep her eyes open and eventually fell asleep on the couch. The next morning, she woke up in her bed, covered with a blanket. She felt sore and couldn't fully remember what had happened. She hadn't intended to have any intimacy on the first date and suspected that he might have given her something illegal and taken advantage of her. However, she also admitted that she had let him into her apartment voluntarily, which complicated the situation, especially if she were to report it to the police. Realizing what had likely happened, she cried while taking a shower. After getting dressed, she immediately went to the pharmacy to get emergency contraception, as she wasn't using any birth control. Later, she sought medical attention at a clinic. After receiving a message from Jeff, expressing his desire to see her again in a few weeks, she declined his invitation. She then broke down in tears, returned to her apartment, and began stripping her bed and washing the sheets. She also washed all the clothes she had worn the night before. Despite her strong desire to burn both the clothes and the sheets, she refrained due to financial difficulties. She locked herself in her apartment until Monday when she had to go to work. Upon arriving at work, she discovered that Jeff had been spreading rumors, calling her promiscuous. This was his retaliation for her refusal to see him again. As a result, a significant portion of the staff began perceiving her negatively, and she found herself surrounded by unwanted advances from numerous men. Many of them weren't even interested in taking her out to dinner, but just wanted to go to her place. She endured the constant gossip, and Jeff even shared photos of her. Hoping the situation would calm down, she waited, but when it didn't, she began looking for employment in another city, far from her current workplace. After resigning and moving hundreds of miles away, she settled into an affordable apartment and quickly found a new job. Now, she lived in a duplex and led a solitary life, much like a nun. Despite receiving attention from men at her new workplace, she politely declined their advances, still shaken from her experience with Jeff. She feared encountering a man like him in her new environment. Consequently, she focused primarily on work and solitary activities in her modest apartment, holding a somewhat cynical view of relationships. Tim, on the other hand, was gradually adjusting to solitary life. He had been with Kelly since before leaving his parents' house, so living alone was a new experience for him. While it was sometimes challenging, he didn't mind losing touch with many friends from his time with Kelly. He wanted to distance himself from that phase of his life. He mostly focused on work and spent his free time alone in his small duplex. One Saturday, shortly after moving in, Tim was washing his car when his strawberry blonde neighbor came out of her house. Tim remained cautious around women but felt it was important to be friendly with his neighbor. As she approached her car, he decided to introduce himself. "Hi, I'm Tim, your neighbor from next door." She seemed a bit reserved but responded, "I'm Sarah." "That's an interesting name. Is it Irish?" Tim asked. "My grandparents were Irish, so they named me after them," she explained. Tim, who had researched his own ancestry before, added, "Some of my ancestors were Scots-Irish." Sarah's response was direct but not hostile. "There's a difference between Scots-Irish and Irish from Ireland." "Sorry, I didn't mean to offend," Tim quickly replied. "No problem," she said. "Well, nice to meet you, Sarah. I'm right next door if you ever need anything." "I'm fine, but thanks," she responded before getting into her car and driving off. Tim wasn't remotely ready to venture into dating again, but he realized that Sarah was even less prepared, especially with him. Without knowing it, she was not just avoiding him. After finishing washing his car, he went inside, took a shower, and made himself something to eat. A week later, Tim looked out his window and saw Sarah struggling with a large box containing a flat-screen TV. He rushed outside. "Let me help you, Sarah. I can handle it. If it falls, your TV will be ruined, and you wouldn't want that. It's really not necessary. I promise I won't do anything except help you carry it inside." "All right." Tim and Sarah each grabbed one end of the box, with Tim holding one side while she moved to the other. It wasn't excessively heavy, just bulky enough to make it difficult for one person to manage. Together, they carried it to her door, where she stopped to unlock and open it. After bringing it inside, Tim glanced around the room, noticing its feminine decor, tasteful but not overwhelming. "If you ever need help with anything else, Sarah, I'm right next door and happy to help." "Thank you, Tim." As Tim turned to leave, Sarah spoke again. "Would you mind helping me unpack and set it up?" "Of course." Carefully unpacking the box, Tim inspected its contents before placing the TV face down and gently removing the protective wrap. He also found a stand, which he assembled and attached to the unit. After connecting it to the cable, he managed to turn it on, and once Sarah powered up her cable box, they had a picture. "Thank you, Tim. It would have taken me forever to figure this out. It was my pleasure. Well, I'll leave you to enjoy it, but don't hesitate to ask if you need anything else. Tim left, although he wouldn't have minded spending more time with her. Still, he didn't feel ready for dating, and she didn't show any signs of being ready either. Returning to his side of the duplex, Tim felt content with himself. Even if there was no romantic connection between them, at least he had been able to help someone. Despite her ongoing distance, she sometimes offered him a small smile when she saw him. Tim always greeted her, and she responded minimally. The more he interacted with her, the more he found her endearing. However, he had once felt the same way about Kelly, only to realize she hadn't reciprocated his feelings. Sarah seemed even more reluctant to engage with Tim than he was with her, which wasn't very encouraging from his perspective. He wasn't even sure what signs to look for. She rarely, if ever, asked for his help, though sometimes he saw her struggling with something and offered assistance. One day, Tim stepped outside just as Sarah was arriving. She was crying and trembling as she got out of her car. He had never seen her in such a state and was surprised, but his instinct to offer support kicked in quickly. "What's wrong, Sarah?" "It's nothing." "It can't be nothing if you're crying. It's a personal matter. I may not be able to fix everything, but I'm here to listen." "I can't talk about it, Tim." "How about dinner, at least?" "No thanks, I've been through this before, and that's why I'm upset," Sarah said. "Just dinner. I don't know what happened, but I promise I won't make it worse." "How can I trust you?" "Give me the chance to prove it." Sarah hesitated. "Dinner, but no alcohol and nothing more." "Sounds good. I'm not much of a drinker anyway, and all I want is a nice meal. Give me a few minutes to pull myself together." Sarah went inside for about 10 minutes. When she reappeared, she had touched up her makeup and dried her tears. Although she wasn't exactly cheerful, she was at least willing to join Tim for dinner. Feeling uncertain, she asked which car they should take, and she agreed to go in his. "Do you have any preference for a restaurant, Sarah?" "Not really." "What kind of cuisine are you in the mood for?" "You decide." There was a nearby Italian restaurant in the neighborhood, so Tim chose that, thinking Italian food might appeal to almost anyone. Despite the temptation to guide her by placing his hand on her lower back as they walked in, he refrained, given her somber mood. They were seated immediately, and she sat down before Tim could pull out her chair. The waiter asked about their drink preferences, and Sarah opted for water. Seeing this, Tim mirrored her choice, sensing her aversion to alcohol. For his meal, Tim ordered chicken marsala with a marsala wine sauce, mushrooms, and farfalle pasta, while Sarah chose fettuccine alfredo with chicken, mushrooms, and peas. As they ate, Sarah began to relax a little. Although she remained reticent about what had upset her, Tim learned that she worked as a legal assistant for a small law firm. He revealed that he was an accountant at a mid-sized firm and had considered getting his CPA certification but never felt the need. Sarah had aspirations of becoming a lawyer but couldn't afford law school. Wanting to comfort her, Tim shared a personal struggle. "I've been through tough times myself. I discovered my fiancée was cheating on me with another man." "Are you sure she did it willingly and wasn't coerced?" "She made her intentions clear and showed nothing but disdain for me." "That's terrible. You seem like a nice, kind person, but even if I were interested, I'm not ready to open up again. I don't want to delve into my issues, but I'm not looking for anything serious either. Maybe we can just be friends for now? We're neighbors, we can be cordial along the way. Let's leave it at that for now." Tim found himself unsure of what he wanted. Although he found Sarah attractive and potentially kind, his past experience with Kelly's betrayal made him hesitant to trust any woman. Having been so closely involved with Kelly for years, Tim couldn't help but question his judgment when it came to women. If Kelly could cheat on him, what security did he have with Sarah? Sarah, too, was a victim of deception, having been charmed and seemingly wooed by Jeff, only for him to destroy her trust. Although Tim seemed nice, Sarah couldn't shake the fear that he might be just like Jeff, manipulative and deceitful. How could she be sure that Tim wasn't simply pretending to earn her trust? After Jeff's betrayal, Sarah took drastic steps to sever their relationship, including changing her phone number and limiting contact to only close family and friends. Despite this, Jeff somehow obtained her new number a few months later and sent her photos, leaving Sarah feeling insulted and vulnerable. He had sent the photos to shame her and went even further by sharing them with some of her friends and family. It was bad enough that he had used her, but now he had decided to humiliate her as well. Tim and Sarah returned to their usual brief exchanges of greetings when their paths crossed, barely communicating otherwise. Tim had feelings for her but remained cautious, while Sarah was extremely careful, especially after Jeff's recent actions. She blocked Jeff's number, but when that wasn't enough, she changed her phone and number again, this time sharing the new one only with a select few family members. Her family urged her to forget the incident and move on with her life. She assured them she was doing just that, but they kept pressing for details about her personal life. She spent a significant amount of time insisting she was taking a break from dating, but they persisted. Eventually, to calm them, she announced that she was dating Tim. She gathered enough information about him to make the lie sound plausible. Although it wasn't true, it seemed to satisfy her family. Curious about the relationship's progress, they kept asking, but she told them that she and Tim were taking things slowly, providing them with some fictional details about the dates. This seemed to calm them and keep things under control until her parents announced that they were coming to visit and wanted to meet her new boyfriend. Sarah took a deep breath and knocked on Tim's door. "I need to ask you a favor." "Sure, what do you need?" "Please come in." Sarah entered but remained standing. "I feel terrible." "You're not terrible. I've been lying to my parents." Tim began to understand but didn't want to assume. "They've been pressuring me about dating. I like you. Would you mind pretending to be my boyfriend?" "Of course, I don't mind, but, no buts, just let me know the details." Tim hadn't even considered that possibility. Obviously nothing too intimate to make it believable. "We'll have to hold hands, you'll need to put your arm around me sometimes, and I suppose we'll have to kiss occasionally." "I guess so, as long as we don't overdo it." "I certainly won't mind kissing you," Tim said with a playful smile. "I bet you won't. Just remember this isn't real, but we need to make it look real, and it's only while my parents are here. After that, we go back to normal. Neither of us is ready for anything serious anyway." "Thanks. Is it okay if I hug you?" "I guess." Tim hugged her, though she seemed uncomfortable in his arms, so he kept it brief. He watched her leave immediately after. As Tim reflected on the encounter, he realized they shared a similar reluctance to enter genuine relationships, much like Sarah. However, they needed to keep up the facade of being a couple. Sarah hated the idea of pretending to date someone, even if it was just for show, but she felt trapped. She could have said that she and Tim had broken up, but then she'd have to explain why and risk being pushed into dating someone else. Despite having several suitors, Sarah did her best to discourage them, though she begrudgingly admitted that Tim was attractive and decent. Even so, she remained hesitant to let anyone into her emotional space. The idea of starting a fake relationship left her feeling uneasy, but she knew it was necessary for her parents' sake. When her parents arrived, Tim and Sarah picked them up at the airport. Before their parents arrived, they avoided showing any affection, but things became awkward when they felt compelled to act more intimate upon seeing her parents. They held hands and leaned into each other as if it were second nature. "Tim, these are my parents, Liam and Caitlin. Nice to meet you. Sarah's spoken very highly of you." "She's a treasure, and I'm lucky to have her," Tim said, glancing at Sarah, who returned his look with a smile before leaning in to kiss him. Tim was surprised but tried not to show it, returning the kiss. After a brief moment, they pulled apart, exchanged smiles, and turned back to Sarah's parents. Her mother seemed delighted, while her father appeared puzzled. Liam chimed in, "I was about to tell you two to get a room." Tim and Sarah blushed, and Caitlin looked at them fondly. "Isn't young love beautiful?" Caitlin said. "She's 24, not a kid," Liam replied, shaking his head. "She'll always be my little girl," he said with a more serious tone. "Let's get our luggage and head out." They collected their bags and headed to Tim's car, as it was larger. Sarah asked about their accommodations during their stay in the city, and Caitlin quickly responded, since you two have your own places, why don't we stay at your apartment and let you enjoy some privacy at Tim's?" "Mom!" Sarah exclaimed. "Sweetheart, we were young once, too. We understand how things are. Why bother with a hotel when you have a spare bed, anyway?" Sarah was horrified but tried not to show it. What could she do? Admit to her mother that she and Tim weren't really a couple? That would defeat the whole purpose of the charade. Tim looked at her and said, "It's okay, love. Just pack enough clothes for a few days." Sarah wanted to strangle both Tim and her parents, but she had to keep up the act. "We don't usually spend the night together," she muttered. Once they had a moment alone, Tim reassured her, "I'll sleep on the couch, and you can have the bed. I promise I won't make this awkward. My mom already did that. Don't worry, you won't make me uncomfortable. This is just for show in front of my parents." When her parents arrived, Sarah and Tim smiled, though Sarah felt anything but happy inside. They decided to have dinner at a charming restaurant, the same Italian place Tim and Sarah had gone to once before. Liam and Catelyn wanted to order a bottle of wine. Sarah tried to decline, but her mother insisted. "We should celebrate your relationship with such a nice guy." "I'm not sure if I should drink, Mom." "You're not pregnant, are you?" Catelyn asked. "No." "Why would you think that?" "Well, it's not unheard of. Why else wouldn't you drink?" "I don't drink much, but okay, just one glass." "That's my girl." Sarah found herself going further than she'd anticipated to maintain the deception. Catelyn and Liam enjoyed their wine while Tim and Sarah each had only one glass. Catelyn praised Tim, saying, "I think my daughter made a good choice picking you as her boyfriend." "Thank you. She's a wonderful person, and I enjoy spending time with her," Tim responded. "Well, Sarah, your father and I are going to have a lovely evening, and I'm sure you two will as well," Catelyn said. Sarah blushed, glancing at Tim, who nodded subtly. He leaned in to give her a kiss, and she reciprocated. Liam looked at Tim with a hint of disdain. "Sarah mentioned you're Scots-Irish." "Yes, sir. Though my ancestors migrated from Ireland many years ago. Not my first choice, but at least you're not English." "Those damn Brits," Liam said. Sarah interjected, "Dad, stop fighting battles from a century ago." Tim replied diplomatically, "Sir, we know that both Protestants and Catholics in Ireland seek peace and equal treatment. Not much has changed, right? For every Ulster volunteer, there's a member of the IRA, but most people fall somewhere in between." "Try telling that to the militias," Liam muttered. "There are friendships across faiths and interreligious marriages. Not everyone wants to keep Catholics as second-class citizens," Tim added. "You seem well informed, considering your family's history." "After meeting Sarah, I felt the need to educate myself." "I suppose that sets you apart from many," Liam admitted. Catelyn chimed in, "Our daughter assured us he's a good guy, and I think she's right." Sarah remained quiet throughout the conversation, but when it ended, she turned to Tim and gave him another kiss. Their fake relationship seemed to be going better than either had expected. However, they still faced the dilemma of spending the night together at Tim's place, neither of them feeling prepared for anything resembling a physical relationship, despite their pretense. After dinner, Liam and Catelyn expressed their fatigue from traveling and decided to rest. Sarah weakly suggested they stay at a hotel. "Are you sure you don't prefer a hotel? It might be more comfortable." Catelyn quickly rejected the idea. "It'll be nice to have a kitchen and be nearby." They transported the luggage to Sarah's place, with Tim helping her pack some clothes to take to his apartment. As they gathered her things, Liam commented, "I'm surprised you don't already have clothes there." Sarah hesitated before responding, "I need more than just a change of clothes." At Tim's place, he helped arrange her things, making space for them. Tim wasn't particularly fashion-conscious, so clearing space was no big deal. Sarah seemed cautious as she settled in. Noticing her unease, Tim tried to reassure her, "I won't invade your space or bother you. I'll just sleep on the couch and let you rest comfortably in the bed. You seem decent enough, but I've been fooled before. I promise I'm not like the guys you've known before." "That's easy to say. You're the only other person I've kissed, and my ex-fiancée was the first," Tim replied playfully. Not bad for someone with limited experience, she teased. I have a feeling we'll have plenty of opportunities to gain experience while your parents are here. Let's stick to a bit of kissing, hand-holding, and occasional hugs. Sound good, miss? Agreed, sir, Sarah replied with a grin. Tim regretted not washing the sheets earlier, as they hadn't anticipated her staying. Quickly, he grabbed a pillow and blanket to settle on the couch. Just then, there was a knock at the door. They hurried to hide everything and found Liam standing there. Where's the thermostat, and how do you adjust it? Liam asked. Sarah went to help him, and when she returned, both she and Tim collapsed on the couch, exhausted from hours of pretending to be more than they were. Tim began to put his arm around Sarah, but stopped abruptly, realizing what he was doing. She noticed the interrupted gesture, looked at him, shook her head, and bit her lip. Tim, seeming to apologize, said, "We have to be cautious in front of your parents." "You're right, but they're not here now," she replied. Once they were sure there would be no more interruptions, they prepared for bed. Normally, Tim slept in just his boxers, but to be more modest around Sarah, he opted for a t-shirt and lightweight shorts. While he changed in the bathroom, she changed into pajamas in the bedroom. Tim settled on the couch, which was somewhat uncomfortable, but he managed to get some sleep. He briefly woke up when Sarah got up to use the bathroom during the night, but soon fell back asleep. Tim woke up early, putting away his bedding in case her parents arrived unexpectedly, which they did. Tim apologized on behalf of both of them and made coffee. As they sipped their coffee, Sarah came out of the bedroom, having changed from her pajamas into a nightshirt after hearing her parents arrive, trying to avoid any suspicion. Liam and Caitlin expressed interest in exploring the city and spending the day with Tim and Sarah. Since it was Sunday, they didn't have many reasons to decline. The four of them spent the day together, showing Liam and Caitlin around the city, enjoying a pleasant lunch at a nearby quirky spot. For dinner, Caitlin suggested ordering takeout and watching a movie with Sarah and Tim. They found something suitable on their streaming service, and Sarah and Tim relaxed on the couch together, with Tim putting his arm around her as she rested her hand on his leg, keeping a respectful distance. Despite any lingering reservations, Tim began feeling more comfortable being affectionate with Sarah, hugging and kissing her. Although he still carried some emotional baggage from his past relationship with Kelly, being with Sarah felt unexpectedly nice. However, with few opportunities for private conversations, Tim wasn't sure how Sarah truly felt. He regretted that their time together was limited to the week her parents were visiting, but that was the agreement they had made. After the movie ended, Caitlin turned to Sarah and Tim. "I guess it's time for us to leave you two alone to enjoy yourselves," she said with a wink. Liam teased in response, "Even young people don't necessarily engage in those activities every night." "Why doubt that these two will?" Caitlin replied. "It's not guaranteed. Besides, I think you're embarrassing your daughter," Liam said. Sarah blushed at her mother's comment, hugging herself and pulling her hand away from Tim's leg. Tim leaned towards Sarah and whispered softly, just loud enough for only her to hear, "We'll only do whatever you feel comfortable with, whenever you're ready." Liam nodded approvingly and then turned to Caitlin. "He seems like a good guy," he remarked. Caitlin grinned and stood up, followed by Liam. Sarah stood to say goodbye to her parents, and Tim shook Liam's hand as Liam placed his hand on Caitlin's lower back and guided her to the door. Once they left, Tim locked the door. Sarah looked on the verge of tears. "I made a mistake lying to them like that. Now we have to keep up this act for the whole week." Tim approached and placed his hands on her shoulders, though he didn't intend for the gesture to be intimate. Sarah pulled away slightly. "I'm trying to make this as easy as possible," Tim said gently. With that, Sarah gave him a quick hug and hurried off to the bedroom. Tim sighed, retrieved his shorts and bedding from the closet, and headed to the bathroom to change. He turned off the lights and lay down, trying to rest. He felt conflicted. While he was starting to feel attracted to Sarah, she still seemed uninterested. As he drifted off, he reflected on her and their situation. During the day, both Sarah and Tim were busy with work, but they spent their evenings with Caitlin and Liam. This routine continued throughout the week. Tim dedicated a lot of time to holding and kissing Sarah, although he continued to sleep on the couch while she took to bed. Despite the awkwardness of the situation, Tim felt a pang of sadness knowing their time together was limited to just a week. Liam and Caitlin had arrived on a Saturday but chose to leave the following Sunday, giving them a bit more time together before heading to the airport. Sarah and Tim shared breakfast and lunch with Caitlin and Liam. Tim and Liam loaded the luggage into the car, and everything seemed fine until Liam pulled Tim aside for a private conversation. "You two aren't very convincing actors," Liam said. "What do you mean?" Tim asked. "My wife might have some illusions, but I don't. It's pretty obvious that you and my daughter aren't really lovers, and frankly, I doubt you're even a real couple," Liam explained. "What gives you that impression?" Tim inquired. "There are subtle signs in Sarah's behavior, especially when she thinks no one is watching," Liam elaborated. "We're not romantically involved," Tim admitted. "That's a shame. You seem like a decent guy, despite being Scots-Irish," Liam joked. "I wouldn't mind if this fiction became reality," Tim confessed. "Well, good luck with that." "You have my blessing if it happens," Liam responded. At that moment, Caitlin and Sarah approached. Tim drove them to the airport and helped them check in their luggage. Caitlin said goodbye with a hug, while Liam shook Tim's hand. Sarah and Tim hugged as they watched her parents depart. Once they were out of sight, Sarah sighed in relief and let go of Tim, though he held onto her a bit longer. "Sarah, I understand that you've been hurt, and I'm sorry for what that person did to you, but I think I've shown that I'm not like them," Tim said. "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "I want to be a real boyfriend. For now, we don't have to change anything from what we've been doing this week, but I'd like the chance to prove it." "That wasn't part of our agreement," Sarah replied. "Please, give me a chance. Just for a month. I believe I can be the kind of man you need, and you can be the kind of woman I need," Tim said. "We were supposed to be pretending to fool my parents. You fooled your mom, but your dad saw through it. He wasn't angry, though. In fact, I think he approves," Tim said. "You said a month, and we'd only need to hold hands, give the occasional hug or kiss. We're not strangers. We've gotten to know each other this week, haven't we? But is that enough?" "It's enough to start." Despite her initial reluctance, Sarah agreed to start a relationship with Tim. He was careful not to push her, and over time, she seemed to warm to the idea of him being her boyfriend. Tim respected Sarah's boundaries regarding intimacy, so they focused on enjoying each other's company. As their relationship progressed, Valentine's Day approached. Tim made a reservation at an elegant restaurant and bought thoughtful gifts for Sarah, including flowers, chocolate-covered strawberries to match her strawberry blonde hair, and jewelry adorned with garnets that complemented her style. Sarah was pleasantly surprised by Tim's gestures and seemed a bit shy as she accepted his gifts. As she put on the jewelry, she expressed her gratitude, commenting on Tim's thoughtful actions. "It seems like you like me quite a bit," she said with a smile. "I love you, Sarah. And I adore your hair. I want you to be my strawberry Valentine," Tim replied. "And what does that mean?" Sarah asked. "It means whatever you want it to mean," Tim replied with a smile. After enjoying a lovely dinner, they went dancing. Initially, the music was mostly upbeat melodies, but then a slow song began to play. Tim pulled her close, and Sarah felt herself melt in his arms. Though Tim had danced like this with Kelly in the past, it had never felt as good as it did with Sarah. As the song came to an end, Tim felt a twinge of regret. But then Sarah looked at him, her lips slightly parted. He leaned in and kissed her, feeling something different from any kiss he had ever known before. He knew it couldn't last forever, but he would have been content if it had. After the kiss, all he wanted was to kiss her again and again. However, instead of indulging in another kiss, she gave him a shy smile and led him off the dance floor. As they left, Sarah grabbed her purse and looked at him. "Tim, I think it's time to call it a night." They walked back to the car, where Tim courteously opened the door for her. She smiled gratefully as she settled into her seat. Tim drove them to their respective apartments. Sarah got out of the car, and Tim came around to stand by her side. "Sarah, tonight has been incredible. I think this has been the most memorable Valentine's Day I've ever had." "It doesn't have to end just yet, Tim. I understand what you mean, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that. It doesn't have to involve anything you're not comfortable with. I've been taken advantage of in the past, you know. I would never treat you like that, Sarah. That has affected how I see closeness. I just want to do whatever you're willing to do. We'll just hug, and if I do anything that makes you uncomfortable, just tell me, and I'll stop. I'm not sure, Tim. I really care about you. Sarah hesitated, afraid to say love because she feared he might think she was using it to manipulate him. You wouldn't be the first to think that. Let's just sit and hold each other for a while. Haven't I always respected your boundaries? You have. They entered Tim's apartment and settled on the couch. Sarah declined alcohol but accepted tea. Although she was hesitant at first, she grew more comfortable as the evening went on. Tim took a sip of his tea confidently before setting it down. He hugged her, and they kissed again. When his hand wandered to more intimate places, she stopped him, signaling she wasn't ready for that yet. Tim pulled back and focused on rubbing her back. Despite the brief moment of hesitation, she wasn't upset, and he continued to massage her gently. She stopped kissing him, pulled away, and stood up. Tim thought that would be the end of the evening, but then she reached out her hand to him. He took it, stood up, and she led him to the bedroom. Once inside, she turned to him. We could continue if all you want is physical contact. Then let's just do it and get on with our lives. I want much more than just physical intimacy. You're my strawberry Valentine, and I want you to be mine for a long time. That's easy to say. It's true. Let's talk, Tim. All right. Let's keep it simple, she said. They woke up the next morning still holding each other. Tim, last night was wonderful. But how much of it was real? Sarah asked. Valentine's Day may have passed, but I don't want to lose what we found. I meant everything I said, and I want to be with you forever. Some people say marriage is just a piece of paper, but I need that piece of paper if it means you'll be mine, Tim replied. Sarah trembled slightly and smiled sweetly at him. I don't know. I might need a little more time, she admitted. I'm happy to spend the rest of my life convincing you, Tim said. She turned and kissed him. Then let's start right now. Sarah and Tim planned to get married. They obtained a marriage license and had a small wedding. About a week before their wedding, Tim received a call from Kelly. Tim, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have cheated on you like that. How could you cheat on me? Tim asked. I shouldn't have cheated at all. You were my one true love. I thought you were my true love until this happened. Please give me another chance. I'm so sorry. Kelly, I've met someone else. I love her, and we're getting married. She'll never be what I was to you. She won't cheat on me or throw it in my face. I made a mistake. Can't you forgive me? It's over, Kelly. I love Sarah, and I'm going to marry her. I hope you find someone you can truly love. I did love you, Tim. I really did. If you had really loved me, you never would have cheated. Kelly begged and cried, but it was in vain. Tim would never leave Sarah to go back to Kelly. A few years later, Tim and Sarah had two beautiful daughters, Molly and Erin. Molly had dark hair and was a quiet child, while Erin was a true redhead with a fiery temper. They lived in a lovely house, and both Tim and Sarah had good jobs. Sarah worked remotely most of the time, which made it easier to take care of the girls. Catelyn adored her granddaughters and visited as often as she could. Liam still teased Tim about being Scots-Irish. Tim, however, still called Sarah his strawberry Valentine and tried to make every day feel like Valentine's Day for her. Story 2. I was 23 when I let my 22-year-old wife move in with me. We were only dating for 6 months when she told me she was pregnant, so I immediately started preparing to become a family. I let her move in and convinced myself to be ready because this was a consequence of my actions. Well, it turned out she wasn't pregnant, but she was already added to my lease. I thought about how silly it would be for me to ask her to move back out just because it was too early in the relationship to live together. It was already happening, and I loved her at the time. I was nervous, though. Something told me I needed to stay on my toes and take extra care not to get her pregnant. I had conversations with her where I said I hoped to be married someday and wanted to be sure I could spend the rest of my life committed to her. I was expecting her to say something similar back to me, but instead, she just agreed happily, like what I said was romantic. But she didn't understand the weight of it. I continued living with her and loving her, growing closer and closer to her, even though she never really told me she was looking to commit herself to someone for the rest of her life. I just figured that's what people did. They dated or lived together until they decided to get married because no one else could be a better match. After living together for 3 years, we got married. My wife didn't have any friends of her own, so she got to know mine over the years. I didn't mind because she was a very caring girl who deserved to have friends. She also became really good friends with Andrew's sister, Jenny. They started going out together, and it was a huge relief for my wife, with girl time ticked off her list of needs. She had more love and energy to give me. Ironically, it was right around this time that I started to have faith in our marriage. One day, I had 2 of my friends over to play cards while my wife was out with Jenny. Andrew couldn't make it for game night because he had a college class to go to. 2 hours into the evening, I still hadn't heard anything from my wife. She usually sent me a text to let me know how things were going. I was about to text Jenny to ask her how things were going, but she texted me first. She said she had something important to tell me and wanted to know when was a good time to call. I was confused and worried, so I called her. The first truth was that my wife never planned to meet with Jenny that night. The second truth was that Jenny got home and accidentally heard Andrew and my wife having sex in his room. She didn't know it was my wife until she saw her sneak out of the house minutes prior. Just then, while I was still on the phone with Jenny, my wife walked in the house. I dropped the phone and yelled for her to get out. I started hyperventilating, so my friends jumped up and asked what was going on. My wife looked like she had just killed someone. Her eyes were huge, filled with tears, and she wanted to help me, but she knew she couldn't. She knew she was the one that did this to me. Of course, she said sorry to me, but all I could do was tell her to leave and get out. I couldn't look at her. One of my friends sat with me, and the other helped her focus on packing some stuff and leaving. He pressured her to leave, and it was a huge weight off my shoulders. While she packed, I told them it was Andrew she slept with, and they couldn't believe it. The 4 of us had been friends since middle school, and my wife just ripped us apart. I wanted to commit myself to the right woman, and here was my wife going behind my back to sleep with a good friend of mine. I finally trusted her and decided to marry her, only for her to make my worst fear a reality. My friends helped me get revenge on Andrew by throwing a few dozen eggs into his room through an open window. He was no longer invited to our card games. My wife and I did have a few phone calls after this, but they all ended with me hanging up on her. She confessed she developed feelings for Andrew after getting to know him for a while, and when she told him how she felt, he reciprocated her feelings. They were sending pics back and forth for at least a year. To persuade me to forgive her, she told me she regretted cheating on me immediately after it happened. My thought process is that my wife could have stopped talking to Andrew at any time as soon as she realized she was developing feelings for him, or even before that. She should have put a stop to it. There was a woman that tried to befriend me over Facebook for months while I was married. As soon as I gave in and told her we could be friends, she immediately started flirting with me. I blocked her and told my wife about it. She thanked me for letting her know, without admitting what was happening with AP. I am so thankful we never conceived. 2 months after our divorce, she became pregnant with Andrew. They got married, and his parents paid for the down payment on their house. It was never meant to last, though. They got a divorce after the child was born with a completely different skin color. She tried to get child support from AP, but he had run off. This story is full of betrayal and disappointment. Infidelity in marriage has left you in deep pain and disillusionment. It's important to find the strength to heal after such a difficult experience. I hope that in the future you'll be able to find healthy and happy relationships based on mutual respect and trust.